American Top 40.
We're coming to you from Hollywood, and we're on our way to the number one song in the USA. Well, I don't know who taught this next artist how to sing, but I do know who taught him how to swim. Tarzan of the Apes. You see, Englishman Robert Palmer grew up on the Mediterranean island of Malta, where his neighbor was the most famous movie Tarzan of all, Johnny Weissmuller. And Mr. Weissmuller taught young Robert the stroke that kept Tarzan out of the jaws of many a crocodile. This week, Robert Palmer's hit song moves up 4 notches to number 26. Bad Case of Lovin' You. At number 26 on American Top 40, Robert Palmer and Bad Case of Lovin' You. We're counting down the hottest hits in the nation on American Top 40. I'm Casey Kasem, and the countdown continues. And at number 20 is a man who came up with an odd list of likes and dislikes for the newspaper USA Today. His likes include dolphins, Italian-made suits, and prints. His dislikes include working during the daytime and being photographed, which is too bad because if you're a rock star who loves Italian suits, people just love to take your picture. Here's Robert Palmer climbing 6 notches to number 20 with Simply Irresistible. One of the dapper dressers of pop, Robert Palmer, at number 20 this week was Simply Irresistible, his 6th Top 40 solo hit.
American Top 40.
American Top 40 and Shadoe Stevens. Now we're up to a singer whose voice brought a young man back from the brink of death. It happened a few years ago in England, and this singer didn't even know about it until he received a thank you letter in the mail. It was from a mother in northern England. She wrote that her son had been in a car accident and had suffered some very serious injuries. He lay in a hospital bed for weeks. He'd slipped into a coma. His doctors didn't have much hope for him. But then the mother said someone suggested music therapy. The young man loved music. Maybe it would help. So they got a Walkman portable radio and put headphones on the young man in the coma. They tuned the radio to his favorite local station, but nothing happened. But still they kept trying. Days went on, but still nothing happened. Then one afternoon, while still tuned to that same radio station, the song Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer came on. And somehow, some way, something clicked inside the young man. His eyelids fluttered, his head shook. The doctors couldn't believe what was happening. They checked the headphones to find out what song was playing, recognized it, and then the mother said she rushed home and searched the house for any Robert Palmer tapes that her son owned. She brought them back to the hospital, and that was all they played for her son. After a few more days of listening to Robert Palmer's voice, the boy came out of the coma altogether. Well, when Robert Palmer read the mother's letter about this miraculous recovery, he didn't believe it at first, so he checked into it and found out it was all true. Robert says, so I went to visit the mother and the young man in the hospital. It was one of the most gratifying things for me. The young man made a full recovery and checked out of the hospital a few weeks later. Robert Palmer says the family would like to remain anonymous, though they're grateful for Robert's music. Here's his current hit. At number 2 in the countdown, Simply Irresistible. English singing star Robert Palmer. He's got the look, the clothes, the voice. He climbs to number 2 with Simply Irresistible.
American Top 40.
You're listening to American Top 40 and Shadoe Stevens. Next up in the countdown is the British singer who grew up not knowing what his father did for a living because his dad was a spy. He's Englishman Robert Palmer, and Robert recently told GQ magazine that although he grew up in exotic lands, it was a lonely childhood spent on British military bases. His father was stationed in places like Malta for a while, and young Robert spent most of his time with adults and didn't even see a movie or television until he was about 12. He was a teenager when he returned to England, but he felt like an outcast. He didn't really fit in with the local kids. Life isn't easy when your dad's in the spy business. Robert explains that his father listened in on the Soviets during the heat of the Cold War. Robert remembers he couldn't tell us what he did. He'd often come home distraught, probably over some doomsday crisis, and we'd never know what it would be. Robert also says he gets his romantic outlook on life and his well-known sense of style from his father. Now with a license to bop, here's our countdown hitman at 0034 this week, the ultra-cool, ultra-suave Robert Palmer, and Early in the Morning.
Early
Early in the morning, the dashing Robert Palmer moves up 5 notches to number 34 with his 7th Top 40 solo hit.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. What we're doing today is counting down the 40 biggest British hits of the 1980s on the American charts. You know, when it comes to fashion, the British are known for their formal elegance. Well, rocking in at number 38 is a man who carries that tradition forward every time he goes on stage. No torn jeans for him. He wears a suit and a tie every time. His music's hot, but his look is cool. He's Robert Palmer, and this is Addicted to Love. Robert Palmer says the melody of that song came to him one night in a dream, and he woke up and hummed it into a tape recorder. It's the 38th biggest British hit of the 1980s. Might as well face it, you're addicted to love.
Casey's Top